The rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists demanding to be let in, and Marcus Bellweather gripped the steering wheel with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since the doctor's office 3 hours earlier. He wasn't supposed to be on this road. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this side of town, not with his daughter's medical bills piling up on the kitchen counter like a paper mountain threatening to bury them both. But there she was, a woman crumpled on the shoulder of the highway beside a car with smoke curling from beneath its hood, soaked to the bone, cradling something in her arms like it was the last precious thing in the world. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness and second chances, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Hope and Wisdom so you never miss a story that reminds you the world still has good in it. Marcus almost drove past her. God help him, he almost did. He had $40 in his wallet, a daughter named Wren waiting at home with a fever he couldn't afford to treat properly, and a heart so tired from carrying the weight of single fatherhood that he sometimes forgot what it felt like to breathe without effort. But something about the way the woman flinched from the passing headlights, the way she curled tighter around the bundle in her arms, made him pull over anyway. He told himself it was just to check if she was breathing. Her name was Dahlia Okonkwo-Reyes, and when Marcus knelt beside her in the pouring rain, he realized the bundle in her arms wasn't a bag or a box. It was a baby, no more than a few months old, wrapped in a thin blanket that was doing nothing against the cold. Dahlia's lips were nearly blue, her voice barely a whisper as she begged him not to call anyone official, not the police, not anyone who might take her son away. She'd left an apartment that had turned violent, she said, walked for miles with nowhere to go, and her car had finally given up just like everything else in her life seemed determined to do. Marcus had every reason to keep driving that night. He had his own crisis waiting for him, his own daughter burning up with fever, his own bank account gasping for air. But he thought of Wren, thought of what kind of man he wanted her to become, and he knew he couldn't leave a mother and child shivering on the side of a highway while he drove home to nurse his own wounds in comfort. He helped Dahlia into his car, wrapped his jacket around the baby, and drove them both to the only place he could think of that wouldn't ask too many questions or cost too much money, his own small, cluttered apartment above the hardware store where he worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. That night, something shifted in the small apartment that smelled of chamomile tea and old carpet. Wren, despite her fever, insisted on giving up her blanket for the baby, declaring with the fierce generosity only a child possesses that she didn't need it as much as the little one did. Dahlia cried quietly at the kitchen table while Marcus made soup from ingredients that were meant to last the week, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, his cramped apartment didn't feel like a prison of poverty. It felt like a shelter built from something stronger than money. The days that followed weren't easy. Two strangers becoming something like family rarely is. There were arguments about pride, about Dahlia refusing help she felt she hadn't earned, about Marcus insisting that kindness was never meant to be repaid, only passed forward. There were nights when Wren's fever spiked and Dahlia sat up with her, humming lullabies in a language Marcus didn't recognize but somehow understood anyway. There were mornings when Dahlia, healing slowly, started fixing the leaky faucet and patching the walls, refusing to simply be a guest in someone else's struggle. What neither of them expected was that Dahlia had spent years working as a bookkeeper before her life fell apart, and within weeks she had reorganized Marcus's chaotic finances, found him a payment plan for Wren's medical bills he never knew existed, and even helped him apply for assistance programs he'd been too proud or too exhausted to research himself. The stranger he'd rescued from the rain had become the very thing pulling him out of the flood he'd been drowning in for years. 6 months later, on a golden autumn afternoon, the small apartment above the hardware store was filled with laughter that hadn't lived there in a long time. Wren, healthy and glowing, chased Dahlia's son across the living room floor while Dahlia and Marcus sat on the worn couch, watching two families become one without ever needing to say the word aloud. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier and realer than that, built from soup cans and shared blankets and two broken people who refused to let each other fall. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment below. Tell me what part moved you the most, because your words matter more than you know and they help this story reach someone who might need it today. And before we close this chapter, I have a small favor to ask. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, please subscribe to Hope and Wisdom, because your support is what keeps these true reflections of human kindness alive on this channel. Marcus never regretted stopping that rainy night. He often said that saving a stranger was the moment he finally saved himself, and that sometimes the family we're searching for isn't found through blood, but through the simple, terrifying courage of pulling over when every part of you says to keep driving.